In October 2025, during an earnings call with investors, MGM CEO Bill Hornbuckle said three words that should make every Las Vegas visitor furious. Shame on us. He was talking about a $26 bottle of water, a $12 Starbucks coffee. Prices so absurd they became international news stories. And here's the thing, he wasn't apologizing because he felt bad. He was apologizing because Las Vegas tourism had just collapsed for the ninth consecutive month. And Wall Street wanted answers. But here's what nobody's asking. If MGM knew the prices were too high in the summer, why did they raise fees again in December? I've spent the last month going through earnings calls, financial reports, and internal industry data. And what I found reveals a deliberate strategy that MGM doesn't want you to understand. This isn't a story about a few overpriced bottles of water. This is about how the largest casino operator in Las Vegas made a calculated bet to eliminate middle-class tourists and what happened when that bet failed. Let's start with what they were saying before everything fell apart. Part one, the premium strategy. They sold to Wall Street. If you go back and listen to MGM's earnings calls from 2023 and early 2024, you hear a very different story than the one Hornbuckle told in October. In February 2024, when MGM announced record-breaking results for 2023, Hornbuckle told investors something that should have been a warning sign. He said their premium positioning and offerings in Las Vegas enable us to capture incremental profit during major events such as the inaugural Formula One race and our first Super Bowl. Premium positioning. That phrase appeared in nearly every earnings call. It wasn't subtle. MGM made $16.2 billion in revenue in 2023, their highest ever. Their Las Vegas Strip property set all-time records, and Hornbuckle kept hammering this message. MGM wasn't just a casino company anymore. They were a premium hospitality empire. During the Formula One race weekend in November 2023, MGM's average room rates across their properties hit over $800 per night, $800. And in the earnings call, they celebrated it. They told investors this was the future. Major events, premium guests, premium experiences. In March 2024, they announced a partnership with Marriott Bonvoy, one of the world's largest hotel loyalty programs with over 180 million members. The strategy was clear: attract high-tier travelers who think nothing of dropping $500 on dinner. They were renovating flagship properties. They were chasing the luxury customer. And on paper, it was working. But here's where the story gets interesting. At the same time, they're talking about premium positioning and record revenues. They're also systematically raising every fee they can charge. Let me walk you through the first Confrontation, ma'am. In the center is our central. It's a cause so edge or diaphies is important. In 2016, MGM became the first major strip operator to charge for parking, something that had been free in Las Vegas for decades. They took heat for it, but they did it anyway. When the database not free to dust with the pandemic hit in 2020, they briefly restored free parking to lure guests back. But by June 2021, parking fees returned. Fast forward to January 2024, right after they're celebrating record revenues, MGM raises resort fees again. Bellagio, Aria, the Cosmopolitan, $50 per night in mandatory resort fees. That's on top of your room rate. That's not optional. Then in December 2024, and this is crucial, they raise fees again. Resort fees at their luxury properties jump to $55 per night. a $5 increase. Their mid-tier properties go to $50 per night. Even their budget properties, Luxor, and Excalibur, hit $45 per night in resort fees. That's an $8 increase at properties that advertise $29 rooms. Parking fees also went up. Self-parking now costs $20 on weekdays, $25 on weekends. Valet parking jumped to $40 across all properties, a $15 increase at some locations. So here's my question. If business was so good, if the premium strategy was working, if you just had record revenues, why did you need to raise fees twice in 1 year? The answer is in the numbers they don't highlight in the press releases. Part 2, following the money. In October 2025, MGM reported their third quarter earnings, and the numbers tell a very different story than the one they'd been selling. Las Vegas revenue dropped from $2.1 billion in the third quarter of 2024 to $2.0 billion in the same period of 2025. Their earnings, EBITDA, crashed 18% from $731 million down to $600 million. Your cousin said to fight into Vasquez, mid-sajid, had barely shown maintenance. In September alone, Las Vegas saw 8.8% fewer visitors compared to September 2024. In June, the drop was even worse, 11.3%. That's nearly 400,000 fewer people in a single month. And this wasn't a 1 month anomaly. This was 9 consecutive months of year-over-year tourism decline. Let me put that in perspective. Through September, 28.9 million people visited Las Vegas in 2025. That's down 7.8% from the same period in 2024. The Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority reported that room tax and gaming fee receipts dropped 14% in the first quarter of the fiscal year. Convention center space rentals down 9%. Overall tourism revenue down 14% to $91 million. These aren't small numbers. This is a collapse. But here's what's fascinating. Casino gaming revenue didn't drop nearly as much as visitor numbers. In some months, it actually went up slightly. How is that possible? Because MGM wasn't trying to get more people. They were trying to get more money from fewer people. Look at the strategy. Fewer guests times higher prices equals maintained revenue. At least that was the theory. The problem is that the people who could afford the higher prices started going elsewhere. And the people who used to come to Vegas, the middle-class tourists who made up the bulk of visitors, couldn't afford it anymore. This is where the infamous examples come in. The examples is Hornbuckle apologized for. In June 2025, a guest at the Aria Resort posted a photo of their minibar receipt. One bottle of Esca water, $26, $26 for water. The photo went viral. Travel industry watchdog View from the Wing published it, and suddenly everyone was talking about Vegas price gouging. Then came the Starbucks coffee at Excalibur, $12 for coffee at a property that advertises rooms for $29 per night. There were reports of $33 for a bagel and a coffee, stories of tourists getting their bills and feeling physically sick. But here's what MGM doesn't want you to understand. These weren't accidents. These weren't rogue managers setting prices too high. This was the strategy. And we know this because of what Hornbuckle said in that October earnings call. He said, and I quote, "When we think about pricing and things that got everyone's attention, whether it's the infamous bottle of water or Starbucks coffee at Excalibur that cost $12, shame on us. We should have been more sensitive to the overall experience at a place like Excalibur. You can't have a $29 room and a $12 coffee. You can't have a $29 room and a $12 coffee. They think about what he just admitted. He's not saying the coffee was accidentally priced at $12. He's saying they should have been more careful about the optics. The pricing structure was deliberate. They were extracting maximum revenue at every touch point. An investor on that call asked directly, is there a growing gulf between the average bargain loving tourist and the highly valued luxury customer that MGM competes to get? Hornbuckle's answer, the core answer is yes. Yes, there is a gulf. And MGM was on one side of it, pricing out everyone on the other side. He continued, within the 14 resort portfolio that MGM Resorts International runs on the Las Vegas Strip, there's a wide difference in clientele, different tiers, different prices. The premium strategy wasn't just about attracting wealthy guests, it was about systematically eliminating everyone else. Part 3, the internal strategy. Let me explain how this actually works, because the fee architecture MGM built is genuinely impressive in how predatory it is. MGM operates 14 properties on the Strip. On one end, you have Bellagio, Aria, the Cosmopolitan, flagship luxury properties. On the other end, you have Excalibur, Luxor, New York, budget options that families use to be able to afford. The stated strategy, different tiers for different customers. But here's the reality. They made the budget properties unaffordable while making the luxury properties unlivable for anyone without unlimited funds. Let's talk about resort fees, because this is where the real money is made. Resort fees are mandatory charges added to your room rate. You cannot opt out. You're paying for amenities, whether you use them or not. What do you get for your $55 per night at Bellagio? In-room Wi-Fi, which should be free. It's been free at Holiday Inns for 20 years, fitness center access, which most guests don't use, digital newspaper downloads through Press Reader, boarding pass printing, which costs the hotel pennies, access to Paramount Plus, streaming on your room TV, and unlimited local and domestic long-distance calls in 2025. When everyone has a cell phone with unlimited calls, these amenities cost MGM almost nothing to provide. Wi-Fi infrastructure was paid for years ago. The streaming service licenses are negotiated bulk rates. Boarding pass printing is literally paper and ink. But they charge you $55 per night. At a property like Excalibur, the resort fee is $45. But here's the trick. When you search for hotels on Expedia or Booking.com, Excalibur shows up at $29 per night. That ranks it high in search results. Budget-conscious travelers see $29 and think they're getting a deal. Then they get to check out and see the $45 resort fee. Now your $29 room costs $74 plus parking, another $20 if you drove, and now you're at $94 for a room that was advertised at $29. You feel tricked because you were tricked. This is called drip pricing, and it's illegal in Europe and Australia, but in the United States, hotels can still do it. And MGM perfected it. Now add in the food and beverage pricing, the $12 Starbucks coffee, the $26 water bottle, $6 bottles of water at the pool, $15 beers, buffets that used to cost $30 now cost $75. And MGM's response when confronted about this, Jonathan Halkyard, their CFO, said in the October earnings call that they reviewed what customers are actually willing to pay for goods and services. Actually willing to pay. not what's fair, not what's reasonable, what they can extract before you refuse. They implemented 90% of those pricing adjustments by October, which means they lowered some prices. But here's what they didn't lower: resort fees, parking fees. The mandatory charges stayed exactly the same. They took away the $26 water bottle for the PR win, but kept the $55 resort fee because that's where the real money is. Hornbuckle said in that same call, "We lost control of the narrative over the summer." I think we would all agree to that in hindsight. Lost control of the narrative. That's corporate speak for "we got caught." They didn't lose control of the pricing. They lost control of the story. Part 4, the human cost. Let's talk about who actually paid the price for MGM's premium strategy. First, the tourists and middle-class American families who used to take annual trips to Vegas found themselves priced out. They'd book a room for $100 a night, then discover it's actually $175 after resort fees and parking. Multiply that by 3 nights, add in overpriced food and entertainment, and suddenly that Vegas trip costs more than a week in Mexico. So they stopped coming. Canadian visitors, traditionally some of Vegas's most loyal customers, dropped off dramatically. 400,000 fewer Las Vegas travelers used Spirit Airlines alone. The airline had been a major pipeline for Canadian tourists. Between political tensions over tariffs and the terrible exchange rate making everything even more expensive, Canadians chose to vacation elsewhere. Southern California drive-in traffic collapsed. People who used to make weekend trips to Vegas, a 4-hour drive from LA, stopped coming. Why drive to Vegas to pay $25 to park when you can go to San Diego or Palm Springs? International travelers chose Europe instead. With Vegas prices soaring and the dollar strong against other currencies, European destinations became comparatively cheaper. And during the summer, when Vegas temperatures hit 111 degrees, tourists asked themselves, why am I paying premium prices to be outside in this heat? The viral moment that captured all of this was that $26 water bottle receipt. A tourist paid it, photographed it, sent it to a travel blog, and it exploded across the internet. That one receipt became the symbol of everything wrong with Vegas pricing. But it wasn't just tourists who suffered. The workers took the real hit. Casino dealers reported slower tables. Fewer players means fewer hands dealt, which means fewer hours scheduled. Restaurant staff saw empty sections. When tourism drops 8%, those servers and bartenders lose shifts. Some lose their jobs. Housekeeping staff had fewer rooms to clean. And in the hospitality industry, fewer rooms means fewer hours. These workers live on those hours. Valet drivers used to make 6-figure incomes from tips. High rollers would tip $100 or more for bringing their car around. But now, automated parking kiosks. Guests paying $25 just to park aren't in a tipping mood. And the workers who remained faced a new kind of pressure. They were forced to upsell angry guests. Imagine being a front desk clerk, having to explain to a family that their advertised $99 room is actually $174 with fees, then trying to sell them on a suite upgrade or a paid breakfast package while they're furious. That's what MGM employees dealt with every single day. The locals suffer too. Las Vegas's economy runs on tourism. When visitor numbers drop 8%, city revenue drops 14%. That affects schools, roads, public services, everything. MGM instituted a 3 hours free parking for Nevada residents policy, which sounds generous until you remember that locals used to park free all day, every day. It was how they patronized strip properties for shows, restaurants, or shopping. Now they get 3 hours before getting charged. It's not a benefit, it's an insult. Local businesses that depend on strip foot traffic saw revenues fall. When fewer tourists come to Vegas, fewer people walk through shops, eat at off-strip restaurants, or hire local services. The entire ecosystem suffers. And local casino operators started speaking out. Derek Stevens, who runs Circa, the D, and Golden Gate downtown, talked about pricing concerns. Jonathan Jossel, CEO of the Plaza, said on a podcast after hearing about the $33 bagel and coffee, "We've got to fix this as a community. It's a concerning trend." Downtown operators eliminated parking fees and resort fees to differentiate themselves from the Strip, but they can't compete with the Strip scale and prestige. MGM knew this. That's why they didn't care. The breaking point came in summer 2025. July was what Hornbuckle called a rough month. The combination of extreme heat, multiple days over 111 degrees, and sky-high prices created a perfect storm. Hotels had availability, restaurants had empty tables, but MGM kept the prices high. They kept the fees. Hotel occupancy dropped. Revenue per available room dropped, but they didn't adjust, not until the third quarter earnings came out and Wall Street demanded answers. Even then, their adjustment was minimal. In September, the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority coordinated something unprecedented: the fabulous 5-day sale, a citywide discount event. Hotels slashed rates, shows offered deals, restaurants ran promotions, MGM participated. And you know what happened? They booked 300,000 room nights during that week, nearly double their typical pace. Hornbuckle said in the earnings call, "I think the sale that the community did, and we participated in a meaningful way, demonstrated we understand value. We understand Las Vegas." But here's what that actually demonstrated. They could afford to charge less all along. The margins were there. They just chose not to. They only dropped prices when the alternative was empty rooms and investor panic. That's not understanding value. That's panic. Part 5, the cover-up. Here's what's remarkable about this entire story. You're probably just hearing about it now. MGM's October 2025 earnings call, where Hornbuckle admitted shame on us, happened in late October. It was covered by the Las Vegas, Las Vegas, Review Journal, the local paper that actually pays attention to casino earnings. But national media, almost nothing. The New York Times didn't cover it. The Wall Street Journal didn't make it a front page story. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, nothing. Why? Because gaming companies spend millions of dollars on advertising in travel media. MGM Resorts advertises heavily in travel magazines, airline publications, and tourism websites. When you're buying that many ads, editors think twice about running stories that might upset you. The narrative control is impressive. MGM's press releases after earnings always emphasize the positive. Record revenues, strong bookings, premium positioning. The declines get buried in the financial documents that most journalists don't read. When the $26 water bottle story went viral, MGM's PR team could have responded immediately. They could have addressed it in July. Instead, they waited until October, until they were forced to address it on an earnings call with investors who'd seen 3 quarters of declining strip revenue. That's not transparency. That's how that's damage control. In their start to Wall Street, the message was always, we're premiumizing the experience. We're attracting high-value customers. This is strategic. To customers after the backlash, we hear you. We're adjusting. We care about value. But the reality? They only price corrected after losing $630 million in quarterly earnings compared to the previous year. After 9 straight months of tourism decline, after the math stopped working. Here's something else you didn't hear about: employee NDAs and internal pressure. Casino workers can't speak publicly about company policies without risking termination. Those dealers, servers, and front desk clerks who watch this strategy like unfold, they're not allowed to talk about it. I reached out to multiple current and former MGM employees. Several agreed to speak on background, but wouldn't go on record. One told me, we were told to defend the fees no matter what guests said, even when we agreed the prices were ridiculous. Another said, management kept telling us this was about attracting a better class of customer, but we could see the floors getting emptier. These workers watched the strategy fail in real time, but they couldn't say anything publicly because speaking out means losing your job in an industry where everyone knows everyone. And then there's the competitive silence. Caesars Entertainment has nearly identical resort fees and parking charges. Wynn charges fees. Most strip properties charge fees. No major operator wants to be the first to eliminate fees because it's too profitable. Think about it. If MGM pulls in $55 per room per night in resort fees across thousands of rooms, that's tens of millions of dollars in nearly pure profit. No major operator wants to give that up, so they all stay quiet while one takes the heat. Downtown casinos eliminated resort fees. Some independent properties offer free parking, but they don't have the prestige of the Strip. And MGM knows that for most tourists, it's Bellagio or Caesars or nothing. The smaller operators can't change the market. Only the big players can, and they won't, not unless forced. So why was October 2025 different? Why did Hornbuckle suddenly admit fault? Because he had no choice. Yeah. You can spin one bad quarter. You can blame weather or conventions, but 9 consecutive months of decline. Wall Street doesn't accept excuses. Investors were asking hard questions. The stock had taken a hit, and Hornbuckle needed to show he understood the problem and had a solution. So he gave them the shame on us moment. He apologized for the $26 water. He said they'd price corrected, but notice what he didn't say. He didn't announce they were eliminating resort fees. He didn't say parking would be free again. He said they'd adjusted prices on some goods and services. The big fees, the ones that actually matter, stayed in place. And then just weeks later in December, they raised fees again. December 2024. After admitting in October they'd overcharged, after apologizing, after saying they lost control of the narrative. They raised resort fees by $5 at luxury properties, raised parking fees by $2, standardized valet at $40. That tells you everything you need to know about how seriously they took the backlash. Part 6, what happens next? So where does this go from here? And MGM claims they've made corrections. And Hornbuckle said in the earnings call, they've gone through the organization and price corrected. But what does that actually mean? They got rid of the $26 water bottles. The $12 Starbucks coffee probably costs $10 now. Some menu prices came down, but resort fees, still $55 at Bellagio, still $50 at MGM Grand, still $45 at Excalibur. Parking fees, still $25 on weekends, still $20 on weekdays. Valet, still $40. The mandatory fees, the ones that generate massive profit margins, those didn't change. So the price correction was really just adjusting the things people could photograph and share on social media. The structural extraction remained intact. Hornbuckle said fourth quarter bookings look strong, that they might even beat 2024's all-time fourth quarter. But here's the thing, he said similar things before. And besides, one strong quarter doesn't erase 9 months of decline. Conventions do help, major events help, but conventions were always part of Vegas's calendar. The question is, what happens during normal months? What happens when there's no F1, no Super Bowl, no Taylor Swift concert driving demand? That's when the pricing strategy gets tested. And so far, it's failing that test. Let's look at the broader industry trend, because MGM isn't operating in a vacuum. Every major casino operator is watching this situation closely. If MGM can maintain profit margins with high fees despite lower volume, other operators will absolutely follow that model. Why wouldn't they? It's more profitable to have fewer guests paying more than more guests paying less. Lower operating costs, less wear on facilities, smaller staff. If MGM pulls this off, it becomes the industry standard. But if tourism continues declining through 2026, they'll be forced to eliminate fees. Not because they want to, but because empty rooms generate zero revenue. The question is, how long can they hold out? How much market share are they willing to lose before they blink? And by the time they do eliminate fees, will the damage to Las Vegas's reputation be permanent? Because that's the real risk here. An entire generation of potential tourists now associates Vegas with being ripped off. They've seen the stories. They've heard from friends who went and felt gouged. They're making vacation plans, and Vegas isn't on the list. That perception takes years to change. Even if MGM eliminated all fees tomorrow, it would take massive marketing campaigns to convince people Vegas is affordable again. And MGM isn't eliminating fees tomorrow or next month or probably next year. Here's the bigger picture. Las Vegas has reinvented itself before. In the 50s and 60s, it was mob-run gambling. In the 90s, it tried to become a family destination with circus acts and pirate shows. In the 2000s, it pivoted to what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, the adult playground. Each reinvention took years and hundreds of millions in investment. The current reinvention, luxury-only destination for the top 10% of earners, faces a fundamental math problem. Las Vegas has about 150,000 hotel rooms. You cannot fill 150,000 hotel rooms with only wealthy travelers. There aren't enough of them, and they don't vacation frequently enough. The old Vegas model worked because it had volume. Millions of middle-class tourists coming for 3-day weekends, dropping $1,000 each on rooms, gambling, food, shows. Multiply that by 40 million visitors a year, and you have an economy. The new model, fewer visitors spending more, only works if the fewer visitors spend exponentially more. And the data shows they're not. They're just going elsewhere, to Macau, to Singapore, to regional casinos in their own states. The wealthy travelers MGM is chasing have options, many options, and they're choosing those options. The competition is real. Every state except Utah and Hawaii now has some form of legal gambling. You don't need to fly to Vegas to play blackjack anymore. There's probably a casino within an hour of wherever you live. Regional casinos don't have the spectacle of the Strip, but they also don't have $55 resort fees and $25 parking. For a lot of people, that trade-off makes sense. International destinations are booming. Macau's gaming revenue is up. Singapore's Marina Bay Sands is packed. Dubai is building massive resort casinos. And now there's online gambling, sports betting. You can lose money from your couch. Why fly to Vegas? The only answer Vegas had was because it's Vegas, the experience, the shows, the spectacle, the energy. But when that experience costs twice what it used to and feels like you're being nickel and dimed, at every turn, the answer becomes maybe not. MGM is betting they can make Vegas exclusive, premium, luxury. But luxury requires delivering value at a high price point. A $55 resort fee for Wi Fi and boarding pass printing isn't luxury, it's extraction, and customers know the difference. So, what's the point of no return? If 2026 shows continued tourism decline, MGM and other major operators face a genuine crisis. They'll have two options: eliminate fees and compete on value, or accept a permanently smaller market. My prediction: fees stay, room rates drop, Vegas becomes smaller but more expensive on a per visit basis. They'll rely more heavily on major events like sports, conventions, concerts to drive periodic demand surges. The everyday tourist becomes less important to the model. The casualties, mid-tier properties will struggle. Some may close or convert to other uses. Middle class access to Vegas becomes a thing of the past. The local economy takes a sustained hit as tourism stabilizes at a lower level. And the culture of Las Vegas, that idea that anyone can come and feel like a high roller for a weekend, that dies. It becomes what MGM wanted it to become, a playground for the wealthy. But here's the wild card: regulatory pressure. Will Nevada finally force fee transparency? Will they require hotels to show the full price up front instead of hiding fees until checkout? Some state legislators have proposed bills. They haven't passed yet. Federal pressure is possible. The FTC has started cracking down on hidden fees in other industries, concert tickets, short-term rentals. Could they force hotels to include resort fees in advertised rates? Europe did it. Australia did it. The U.S. could too. Consumer boycotts might force change. If enough people simply refuse to visit Vegas until fees are eliminated, operators would have to respond. Social media makes organizing these boycotts easier than ever. One viral TikTok campaign could cost MGM millions. And there's the downtown Las Vegas Renaissance. Properties like Circa, the Plaza, and Fremont Street casinos are thriving by being the anti-strip. No resort fees, free parking, cheaper drinks and food. They're smaller, less flashy, but they're authentic Vegas in a way the corporate strip isn't anymore. If that model proves sustainable, it could pressure strip operators to change. Or it could create a two-tier Vegas, budget downtown, luxury strip, and tourists choosing based on what they can afford. None of these wild cards are guaranteed, but they're all possible. And MGM's leadership should be paying attention because the next crisis won't be solved with a mea culpa on an earnings call. The next crisis requires actual change. So here's what actually happened. MGM didn't accidentally price gouge Las Vegas tourists. They made a calculated bet that they could replace middle-class visitors with wealthy ones. When that failed, they tried to extract more money from whoever was left through fees, surcharges, and inflated prices on everything from water bottles to parking spaces. The $26 water bottle wasn't a mistake. The $12 coffee wasn't an oversight. It was the strategy. Maximize revenue per guest, push pricing to the absolute limit, and only apologize when the math stops working. Hornbuckle's shame on us wasn't a moral revelation. It was damage control. He said it on an October earnings call after 9 months of declining tourism, after Wall Street demanded answers, after the company's Las Vegas revenue dropped $100 million in a single quarter. And even then, even after admitting fault, MGM raised fees again in December because the strategy hasn't changed. They just got better at hiding it. So at MGM Resorts, we're asking publicly, if you knew prices were too high in July when you lost control of the narrative, why did you raise resort fees and parking fees again in December? You say you've price corrected and that you understand value. But resort fees are still $55 per night at Bellagio. Parking is still $25 on weekends. What actually changed? You apologized for the $26 water bottle. That was good PR. But you didn't apologize for the $55 mandatory resort fee that you charge every single guest, whether they use the amenities or not. Why is that? You told investors you're focused on premium guests and premium experiences. And you said there's a growing gulf between bargain-loving tourists and the valued luxury customers you want. So let me ask directly, are middle-class families no longer welcome in Las Vegas? Because that's what your pricing suggests. When a family of four has to pay an extra $220 in resort fees for a 4-night stay, plus $80 to park their car, plus inflated prices on every meal and drink. You're not offering premium experiences. You're pricing them out. Is that the goal? And here's my question for everyone watching. Have you been to Vegas recently and felt like you were being ripped off? Drop your story in the comments. Tell me about the surprise fees, the parking charges you didn't expect, the resort fees that cost more than your room rate, the $10 beers and $15 hot dogs. I want to document this because MGM and other operators need to see that people are paying attention. If you work in the Las Vegas hospitality industry and you've seen this strategy from the inside, I want to hear from you. You can reach me confidentially. I know you can't speak publicly without risking your job, but your perspective matters. You've watched this unfold on the ground floor. You've dealt with angry guests. You've seen the impact on your coworkers. Your voice deserves to be heard. This investigation isn't over. This is just part one. Next week, we're looking at Caesars Entertainment because MGM isn't the only operator playing this game. Caesars has the same fee structure, the same premium positioning, and I've been digging through their earnings calls and financial reports. What I found shows this isn't a single company problem. It's an industry problem. And the week after that, we're going deep on resort fees, how they're calculated, why they're legal, where the money actually goes. I've obtained industry data that shows exactly how profitable these fees are. The margins are obscene. You're going to want to see this. Subscribe, turn on notifications, share this video with anyone who's planning a Vegas trip. They need to know it's what they're walking into. This investigation is just getting started, and the deeper I dig, the worse it gets.